Chosen ones, March 28th. God is warning you a billionaire shift is happening. Pay attention now. I am going to be direct with you. If in the last few months you have felt a financial pressure that makes no sense, if you work, if you strive, if you do everything you know how to do, and yet money seems to slip through your fingers, if you look at your bank account and do not understand how it is possible for the result to be so disproportionate to the effort, then pay close attention. Because what I am going to reveal to you in this video is not financial coaching. It is not a get-rich-quick formula, and it is not positive thinking. What I am going to show you is that God is issuing an urgent alert to the chosen ones. A shift of billionaire magnitude is underway, and it begins now, this week, starting this Saturday, March 28th. And if you do not understand what is happening in the spiritual world behind your finances, you run the risk of sitting on top of a gold mine, thinking you are in a desert. I know that when prosperity and faith are spoken of in the same subject, many people are suspicious, and rightly so. Brazil is full of people using the name of God to manipulate, extort, and deceive. But I am not here to promise you that you will wake up a millionaire tomorrow. I am here to show you that there is a spiritual engineering behind the way abundance operates, and that what you have lived through until now, the scarcity, the frustration, the plans that did not work out, all of this is part of a training that is about to end. And when it ends, what comes is not an increase. It is a total reconfiguration. But before I continue, I need to ask you something. If during this video a single sentence makes sense to you, subscribe to this channel and activate the notification bell. This content is being directed specifically to those who have been marked to live a radical change in the area of finances and purpose. And what I am going to reveal in the next few minutes could be the difference between you continuing to survive and beginning to operate at the level God always planned. Now let us get to what matters. And I need to start with something that will bother you but is absolutely necessary. The greatest obstacle between you and the abundance that God has prepared for your life is not the government, it is not the economy, it is not the job market, and it is not your lack of a degree. The greatest obstacle is the mental programming you carry about money, and this programming in most cases is not yours, you inherited it. A survey conducted by the Fundação Getúlio Vargas in partnership with the Banco Central do Brasil revealed that more than 70% of adult Brazilians make financial decisions based on beliefs and emotional patterns learned in childhood, not on rational analysis. 70%. This means that the way you deal with money today, the way you spend, save, invest, or avoid it, was largely determined by the phrases you heard at the dinner table when you were 10 years old. Phrases like, "We are poor but we are honest," like, "Money is the root of all evil," like, "We were not born to be rich," like, "People like us do not get there." I want you to stop now and think, what was the phrase about money you heard most in your house when you were a child? You do not need to answer me out loud. Answer it to yourself, because that phrase, that specific programming, is probably the invisible chain that has kept you trapped to a financial ceiling that does not correspond to the potential God placed in you. And here is the first revelation I need to give you. The Bible never said that money is the root of all evil. Never. What Paul wrote in 1 Timothy 6, verse 10, was that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. The difference is abyssal. Money is a tool. To love money, to make it the center of your existence, to place it above God, above people, above purpose, that indeed is destructive. But money itself, money is neutral. And in the right hands, money is an instrument of justice, of restoration, and of generational impact. And that is exactly what you are being prepared for. Not to accumulate, to distribute with purpose, not to flaunt, to finance what heaven needs to be financed on earth. Now I need to take you to a deeper understanding. And what I'm going to reveal shortly is so crucial that if you truly absorb it, it will change the way you wake up tomorrow morning. In biblical Hebrew, one of the words for wealth is osher. But osher does not simply mean having a lot of money. The root of osher is connected to the idea of weight, of substance, of density. When the Bible speaks of wealth in the original sense, it is speaking of something that has real weight, that has substance, that is dense enough to leave a mark on the world. Biblical wealth is not a bank balance. It is the capacity for impact. And that is why God does not deliver wealth to those who do not have the structure to carry it. Because true wealth has weight, and weight without a foundation crushes. Think of this with a practical image. Imagine a 30-story building. Before raising the first floor, the engineers spend months, sometimes years, working on what no one sees: the foundation. Deep piles, reinforced concrete, soil analysis, structural calculations. If someone passes by the construction site during this phase, they look and think, nothing is happening here. But it is exactly the opposite. Everything is happening. The most critical phase of the entire construction is the one no one sees. And your life is in that phase. The years of struggle, of tightness, of sleepless nights, thinking about how to pay the bills, of humiliations, of doors closed in your face, of plans that went wrong. They were not punishment. They were foundation. God was building in you the structure necessary to support the weight of the abundance that is to come. The issue is that most people give up in the foundation phase. They give up because it is invisible, because no one applauds, because you cannot post it on Instagram. And when they give up, the building God planned is never raised. Not because God failed, but because the person left the construction site prematurely. If this content is hitting your heart, leave your like on this video now. This gesture is not for me. It is for the algorithm to understand that this message needs to reach more people. And in the comments, write the word abundance. When you write abundance, you are making a spiritual declaration. I align myself with what God has prepared for me in the financial area. Write abundance now. Now let us go to a point that will directly confront something you may have believed your whole life. There is a theology of poverty that has infiltrated the Brazilian church, and which is, with all due respect, a biblical distortion. It is the idea that to be poor is to be spiritual, that those who have money are far from God, that true holiness manifests in scarcity. I need to dismantle this carefully, because I know it touches deep wounds. But look at what the Bible actually shows. Abraham was rich. The biblical text says that Abraham was very rich in livestock, in silver, and in gold. Job was the richest man in the East. David accumulated enough wealth to finance the construction of the most grand temple of antiquity. Solomon was so prosperous that kings and queens traveled continents to see what he had built. These were not people distant from God. They were people deeply connected to the divine purpose, and the wealth they possessed was neither an accident nor a spiritual distraction. It was a tool for the fulfillment of purpose. Now, is it true that Jesus spoke about the dangers of wealth? Yes. He said it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. But what many people do not realize is that Jesus was not condemning wealth. He was condemning the dependence on wealth. Wealth that replaces God as the source. Wealth that becomes identity instead of an instrument. Wealth that enslaves instead of serving. And there is a monumental difference between having money and being possessed by money. God wants you to have it, but He needs to ensure that the money does not have you. That is why the training was so long. That is why the phase of scarcity was extended. It was not cruelty, it was surgery. God was removing from within you the roots of financial idolatry, the anchors of identity based on assets, the invisible idols that would cause wealth, if it arrived too early, to destroy you instead of edifying you. And if you survived this training, if you are here today watching this video after everything you faced, then I have news for you. The surgery is over. The foundation is ready. And what comes now is visible construction. But pay attention. I need to reveal to you now how this change will operate in practice, because it is not in the way most imagine. And if you leave this video before hearing this part, you will miss the key that connects everything. The billionaire shift that God is operating does not begin in your bank account. It begins in your atmosphere. Atmosphere is a word we use casually, but it has a deep spiritual meaning. Your atmosphere is the invisible environment that surrounds your life and determines what is attracted to you and what is repelled from you. Researchers at the HeartMath Institute in California demonstrated that the human heart emits an electromagnetic field that extends several meters away from the body, and this field is directly influenced by the person's emotional state. When you are in a state of gratitude, peace, and positive expectation, Your electromagnetic field literally changes frequency. And this change in frequency alters the way people around you respond to you, how opportunities present themselves, and how resources flow in your direction. This is not mysticism, it is measurable physics. And when the Bible says in Proverbs 4 verse 23 that above all else guard your heart, for from it flow the springs of life, it is saying, among other things, that the state of your heart is the transmitter that determines the frequency of your life. And here is the point. Before God changes your financial circumstances, He needs to change the frequency of your heart. Because if your internal frequency remains calibrated for scarcity, fear, and distrust, even if 1,000,000 reais drops into your account tomorrow, you will find a way to lose it all. Not by bad luck, by frequency. That is why this Saturday is so decisive. The day March 28th marks the moment when God is recalibrating the internal frequency of His chosen ones. It is not about receiving more. It is about becoming compatible with more. Because divine abundance does not violate the law of compatibility. It flows to where it finds the structure to be sustained. Now I need to speak about something that very few spiritual teachers mention, but which is absolutely decisive: the role of active obedience in the release of supernatural resources. There is a brutal difference between passive faith and active faith. Passive faith is believing that God can do it. Active faith is acting as if He is already doing it. And the Bible is full of examples where the manifestation of the miracle depended on a human action that, from a logical point of view, made no sense at all. In the story of the widow of Zarephath, recorded in 1 Kings 17, we find a woman in a desperate situation. The country was in a drought. She had only a handful of flour and a little oil, enough for one last meal for her and her son. After that, she expected to die of hunger. And at that exact moment, the prophet Elijah arrives and asks her to make a bread for him first. From a human point of view, this is absurd, even cruel. You have a widow on the brink of death, and the prophet asks her to give the little she has. But it is exactly here that active obedience operates. Elijah was not being insensitive. He was activating the celestial mechanism of supernatural provision. Because what happened after the widow obeyed? The flour was not used up. The oil did not run dry. During the entire period of drought, the provision was uninterrupted. Do you perceive the pattern? Supernatural abundance was released after an act of obedience that defied human logic. The widow did not wait to have an excess to give. She gave from what she did not have. And God multiplied what was humanly impossible to multiply. And I want you to think, is there any area in your life where God is asking for a step of obedience that does not make sense to your logic? It could be giving when you think you do not have enough. It could be investing in a project when everyone around says it is risky. It could be leaving the stability of something that pays you but does not complete you, to follow something that completes you but does not yet pay you. Whatever that step may be, I want you to know, active obedience is the key that unlocks the celestial vault. Share this video with someone who is struggling in the financial area, someone who has lost hope that the situation can change, someone who works hard but does not see results proportional to the effort. That person needs to know that what they are living is not the final chapter. It is the training for what is coming. Now I need to move forward to a point that I consider the most powerful of all this content. And if what you have heard so far has already moved you, what comes now will seal everything. The billionaire shift that God is orchestrating in the lives of the chosen ones is not individual. It is generational. And this is the part that completely changes the way you view what you are living. In Brazil, data from the IBGE shows that intergenerational social mobility is one of the lowest among large countries. What does this mean in practice? It means that statistically, if your parents were poor, you have a very high probability of being poor. And your children as well, and your children's children. It is a cycle, a chain that reproduces itself generation after generation. But generational cycles are not just economic, they are spiritual. And it is in the spiritual field that they must be broken first. In the Bible, when God makes a covenant with Abraham in Genesis 12, He does not say, "I will bless you." He says, "I will bless you and you will be a blessing, and through you all the families of the earth will be blessed." Do you perceive the architecture? The blessing does not stop at Abraham. It flows through Abraham. Abraham is not the final destination of the abundance. He is the channel. And that is exactly what is being activated in your life now. You are not being prepared just to have more. You are being prepared to be the breaking point in your family lineage, the person who breaks the cycle of scarcity that has repeated for generations, the person through whom abundance begins to flow not only for themselves, but for their children, their grandchildren, and an entire network of lives that will be impacted by your obedience. This is weight. This is responsibility. And that is exactly why the training was so intense. God was not punishing you with scarcity. He was forging you with responsibility, because delivering generational wealth to someone without generational structure is to create destruction instead of a legacy. The Hebrew word for legacy is nachala. And nachala is fascinating because it comes from the same root as nachal, which means river, stream of water. In other words, a biblical legacy is not a static object kept in a vault. Legacy is a current that flows. It is a river that runs from generation to generation, irrigating every life it passes through. When God establishes you as nachala, He is transforming you into a river of provision that does not run dry. And this Saturday, the 28th, is the milestone where this current begins to flow visibly, not because the date has magic power, but because God chose this point in time so that the foundation He built inside you begins to support the visible structure of your abundance. Now, I need to be honest with you about something that will determine whether this change is completed or remains halfway. And pay attention, because this is what separates those who truly enter into abundance from those who remain eternally on the threshold. There is a phenomenon that researchers at the University of São Paulo call self-sabotage by financial identity. It works like this. Every person has a financial self-image, a kind of internal thermostat that defines how much they believe they deserve to earn, have, and manage. When the external reality rises above this thermostat, the person unconsciously does things to bring the level back down. They spend unnecessarily. They make bad decisions. They sabotage opportunities. They fight with the people who could help them grow. It is not a lack of character. It is programming. It is the internal thermostat operating. And the most disturbing data is this. According to studies by Sebre and Endeavor Brazil, among entrepreneurs who managed to surpass the mark of 1 million reais in annual revenue, more than 35% suffer a significant setback in the following 2 years. And the main cause cited is not the market, not competition, not crisis. It is self-sabotage. The internal thermostat was not recalibrated for the new level, and the old operating system pulled the person back. That is why I insist. The billionaire shift that God is operating begins from the inside out. Before changing your balance, He needs to change your thermostat. Before opening the doors, He needs to ensure that you will not close them from the inside after entering. And how do you recalibrate this thermostat? By the renewal of the mind. Paul wrote in Romans 12, verse 2, "Do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind." The Greek word for transform here is metamorpho, from which comes metamorphosis. It is not a superficial adjustment. It is a structural transformation. It is a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. It is not an improved caterpillar. It is a completely different being. And this financial metamorphosis requires that you begin to declare over yourself what God declares, and stop repeating about yourself what scarcity has taught you. Instead of "I never have money," declare, "I am a channel of divine abundance, and what passes through my hands multiplies." Instead of "People like me do not get rich," declare, "I am the seed of Abraham, and the generational blessing flows through me." Instead of "I am afraid of losing everything," declare, "What God establishes in my life, no force can remove." This is not positive thinking. This is spiritual realignment. It is using the authority of your word to reprogram the internal thermostat that was calibrated by fear and scarcity for decades. The Bible says in Proverbs 18, verse 21, that death and life are in the power of the tongue. In Hebrew, the word for power here is yad, which literally means hand. Death and life are in the hand of the tongue. In other words, your word grasps realities and brings them into the visible world. What you declare is not just sound, it is seed. And seeds, once planted, produce according to their kind. I want you to write in the comments a declaration that will function as a seed planted at this moment. I am a channel of abundance. Write that now. Not as a magic formula, but as an act of faith, as a conscious decision to align your word with what God has already declared about you. Now I will tell you about the divine acceleration that is connected to this moment. And this is fundamental, so do not leave this video before hearing it. There is a biblical concept called in Hebrew Maha, which appears in Isaiah 60 verse 22. The least of you will become 1,000, the smallest a mighty nation. I am the Lord. In its time, I will do this swiftly. The word swiftly in the original is Maha, and it carries the idea of acceleration, of supernatural speed, of temporal compression. When God activates Maha in your life, processes that would normally take years are finalized in months. Connections that would take decades to form happen in weeks. Doors that would take an entire lifetime to open in days. And that is what is happening now. The period of long waiting, of slow growth, of imperceptible progress is being replaced by a phase of acceleration where the return will be disproportionate to the investment. Not because you found a human shortcut, but because God activated the celestial Maha in your trajectory. Think of Joseph of Egypt again. He spent 13 years between the promise and the manifestation, 13 years of slavery, of slander, of prison, but when the moment of Maher arrived, in a single day he left the prison and entered the palace. In 24 hours he went from prisoner to governor. 13 years of preparation, 1 day of manifestation. That is the Maher of God. And I need you to internalize this. The time of long preparation does not invalidate the promise of rapid manifestation. The 13 years were not a waste. They were the price of the foundation. But when the foundation is ready, the visible construction can rise at a speed that surprises even those observing from the outside. Now I need to close with something that will seal all this content in your life. There is a change that has already begun to happen around you, and that perhaps you have not yet noticed. People who were in your life are leaving. Environments that were familiar are becoming uncomfortable. Conversations that used to entertain you now drain you. Places that used to seem normal now seem cramped. This is not a coincidence. It is environmental recalibration. When God changes your internal frequency, the external environment must reorganize to correspond to the new frequency. People who vibrated at the same frequency as your old version naturally begin to drift away. Not because they are bad people, but because the frequency has changed, and the connection that existed was based on a version that no longer exists. And in return, new connections will begin to emerge. People who carry the frequency compatible with who you are becoming. Opportunities that only exist at the level to which you have been promoted. Doors that open not by human effort, but by spiritual compatibility. Prepare yourself, because what is coming will require of you one thing that the training in scarcity taught you: faithfulness. Not faithfulness when it is easy, faithfulness when it is terrifying, faithfulness when the new is so large that your old mind screams for you to retreat, faithfulness when everyone around questions if you are not going crazy. Abraham left Ur of the Chaldeans without knowing where he was going. The widow of Zarephath gave the last handful of flour without knowing if there would be more. David faced Goliath without armor, without a sword, without military experience. In all these cases, human logic said this is suicide, but active obedience said, I do not need to see the result to take the step. I trust the one who commanded me to walk. And that is the posture heaven expects from you now, not perfection. Faithfulness to the next step. You do not need to have the complete map. You need to have the courage for the next step. And the next step is to enter March 28th with a mentality radically different from the one that brought you here. Do not enter as one who asks. Enter as one who receives. Do not enter as one who doubts. Enter as one who has already heard the decree and decided to believe before seeing the manifestation. Do not enter as a victim of your story. Enter as the channel God designated to redirect the flow of abundance in your lineage. You are not just building a bank account. You are building a legacy, a nachala, a river that will run through your life and will irrigate generations that have not even been born yet. Your children will inherit not just resources. They will inherit the mentality of abundance that you are building now. Your grandchildren will be born into an ecosystem of faith and prosperity that began with a decision you made this week. This is bigger than money. This is destiny. In the comments, write "I received the alert." These words are more than a comment. They are a milestone. They are your spiritual signature, saying that you heard what heaven is saying and that you are positioning yourself to receive everything that was prepared. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, do it now and activate the bell. The next video will enter a dimension even deeper than what we began to open here, and if you miss it, you will be without an essential piece of what God is assembling in your life this season. The billionaire shift is not about how much money you will have. It is about who you will become. It is about the channel you will be. It is about the legacy that will flow. It is about the generational cycle that will break. And all of this begins now. Not tomorrow, not next month, now this Saturday, on the day that heaven marked with your name. The ordinary is being transformed into the extraordinary. And the instrument of this transformation is you.